Hey, Dana, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm very well. Thanks, Matt. Nice to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Look, I know, firstly, thanks for kind of jumping on when I know you're traveling and you're currently in the UK in Oxford, right? And I know in your hotel room early in the morning, just to explain the backdrop and where you are, but appreciate you jumping on at probably this unearthly hour. So yeah, thank you.
Not a problem. I'm really glad to be here and apologize for the backdrop.
No, all good, no problem. Look, I think it's a good starting point. It'd be great just to just talk us through your background. Obviously, we know each other from Biochar Life, and we're going to get into some topics around biochar, the environment, smallholder farmers. But just as a starting point, great to just get a kind of a brief of yourself, your background, before we get into the nuts and the bolts of the conversation.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to tell you a little bit about myself. So currently I'm the dean of a business school in Ottawa, Canada. And I've worked in business education for about 20 years. I've worked mostly in Europe, but also have traveled all across the world, visiting business schools and really focusing on what business schools of the future look like in terms of their social impact and their societal impact and role overall. So that's been a mission of mine for much of my career. And along that pathway, I've also myself been an entrepreneur. I've worked in business. I've helped students and others set up social enterprises. And for many years, I've been involved with Warm Heart Worldwide, and currently am the president of Warm Heart Worldwide, and helping them to establish a new social enterprise and work in their community.
Cool. Look, we've talked much about this, and actually now is timely. I just got back to where I live in the north of Thailand and have the air purifier raging throughout the night when I'm trying to sleep, because we deal with this horrendous smoke issue, which is yearly, and this year's probably been, worse than it's been for a long time. And I know really the kind of humble beginnings of Warm Heart in this space are about fixing this problem in Thailand, actually. And there's a much wider footprint of that work now. But do you want to just give us a bit of a brief on biochar as a product, what it is, why it helps? Because a lot of people are starting to hear about biochar as an environmental solution, particularly in this the agricultural burning issue that we have. But give us a bit of a brief on biochar. What is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, Warm Heart started to get involved in biochar for precisely the reason you just described, is, the issue of the smoke in the atmosphere and in the community in which we were working was actually having a significant impact on everything that we were doing. We were working with children. It was impacting their health and certainly the well-being and the economic sustainability of the region, and the community is affected by that pollution. So biochar and working with biochar came about from, looking for a solution to that challenge. And as you know, in northern Thailand, there are a lot of smallholder farmers. When at the end of the season, they burn their crops, and it is the burning of the crop wastes that is creating that smoke and with deadly pollutants in that smoke. And so what biochar is it's a way of reducing smoke by collecting the waste and burning it in a contained way. And so it has a positive impact on climate change by reducing the smoke, but it itself is also capturing carbon within it as well. So it has a dual purpose, and biochar may even have other purposes, such as helping to fertilize the earth and to increase yields in agriculture.
Yeah, it's look, I mean, it's something I hadn't heard of maybe 5 years ago, and it's something obviously I'm involved with now with Biochar Life, but you're hearing more and more about it in the media every day in terms of a carbon removal strategy. One of the things I really want us to get into is social impact, and we're very focused on social impact at Biochar Life and Warm Heart. You guys started out helping these farming communities. It wasn't about carbon removal initially. It was about stopping agricultural burning for health reasons. It's about working with these communities. Yeah, this is something that there are a myriad of solutions out there to mitigate climate change for good reason. And this is just one of them. But something that we are really out there trying to do is communicate the social impact value of what we do. And that means actually maintaining a value and a price of the credits, because we're putting money back into these communities to make sure that we're alleviating poverty, we're creating employment opportunities. Do you think, what is the best way to do that? Do you think people really get it when you're just talking about environment? Do you think, I'm over here in the developing world doing this. You're obviously, over there in the world that funds a lot of this work. Do you think we're doing a good job of that? Do you think there's better ways to do it? How do we communicate the importance of the community element of this work we do?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Matt, because I think, very often when we're looking at impact work in communities, we try to put things into boxes and we have a narrow lens. So, we may want to affect the environment, or we want to help children, or we want to create jobs. But communities are holistic, and rarely is, one thing not connected to another. And Warm Heart has always had this holistic view of its community. Warm Heart exists within the community and is trying to help to solve problems to build long-term sustainability in the community. And Biochar Life has the same mission, right, which is not just environmental, it is social. And the social impact comes, as you say, from the financial benefit of selling the carbon credits, but it's even more than that, because the creation of biochar, it really empowers members of the community to take action, because your smallholder farmers are having as much of an impact on. I mean, they're affected as much by the smoke as you are, right? And community members don't always feel empowered to take action, and that's the one thing I've really liked about our exploration, our journey working with biochar, is that it is something that can be made by a smallholder farmer. It's relatively inexpensive, so it puts the solution in the hands of the people who are suffering from the problem.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a really key point is empowering and working at that kind of grassroots level. Obviously, funding is a key part of this. We need investment in the credits to, make sure the process is circular, and there's always, more biochar that can be produced, more smallholder farmers that benefit. What are some of the other kind of major challenges you've seen in terms of, rolling out the biochar programs in different countries and reaching a scale that we need to reach, which is, beyond a few thousand farmers to really hundreds of thousands of farmers in the next few years?
Yeah, it is really a grassroots initiative, and that's something we always have to keep in mind, is that as much as the solution might work, and we may become somewhat evangelical about the solution when we see the impact that it has on communities, if we are external to the community, we can't always impose a solution, right? It really has to be a partnership. It has to be something that makes sense within the community. So the challenge of scaling, I think, comes from finding the right community partners, and the patience that it takes to, really develop a trusting partnership and relationship with those communities. In many places where we have worked and we've been successful, there's been a community activist, someone out there who's taken this as their own personal mission, to introduce biochar to farmers and to do the training, and to help people see the benefits and to sustain the initiative in it. And you really need that in order to make this work.
Yeah. What do you do? How do you see are you seeing the role of business, government, individual donors? I mean, there's so many, different organizations that, need to kind of give in terms of not just what we do, but actually the whole sector, really. How do you see the role of government and business as being different, if at all? Or, I know that's a very wide question, but interested to hear your perspective on that and the different roles that the different organizations play.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you won't be surprised, as a business school leader, I really think business has a big role to play in this world and has a big responsibility, to help to address some of these large scale challenges. And also, what I always say to my students is, business has a very clear interest in addressing environmental issues and social issues, because we cannot grow wealth or profitability for anyone if we are degrading our resources, right, on the whole. We've been able to get away with that for a long time, but we won't get away with it for much longer. So, I think there's a clear business interest, and I like to advocate that and push that. And that business interest, comes not only from, the players who are involved in making the biochar and selling the carbon credits, but also those who are buying the carbon credits, right? And who are engaging in this and are looking for ways to contribute to environmental and social well-being. So business has a big role. I mean, government, of course, has a role as well, but that role, I think, is, mostly in clearing the way and putting in place the right regulations to be able to support the buying and selling of carbon, and to be able to not restrict our farmers from engaging in those activities.
And do you see, I mean, you mentioned that obviously you're a dean of a business school. You've dealt with students for, I don't know how many years, but a number of years, I imagine. Have you seen have you seen have you seen a change in the sentiment across the years? I know if I think back to when, I was at school, I was never thinking about, plastic recycling or smoke in the air pollution or, what cars did. I mean, we just, I'm going back to the late 80s now, but I would assume, there, and obviously the internet and connectivity now, we've got so much, so many more ways to engage large communities across the world. Are you hopeful? Do you see a kind of mass, I suppose, motivation in this area, and not just with what we do, but just in all environmental programs? And
I definitely have seen a shift. So I started my career in business schools in the early 2000s, and I always say those were the days when my entire MBA class wanted to be investment bankers, and so what they wanted to know was how to maximize profitability and the bottom line. And so what we were really teaching in business schools was how to exploit resources for maximization of shareholder value. And, and to this day, a lot of the literature and a lot of the teaching that's done in business schools is still oriented towards that objective. But what really started to shift after the first financial crisis in 2007, 2008, when people started to really rethink, well, what is the purpose of business, right? Is the purpose of business to generate money for a very small percentage of shareholders and individuals in our society, or is the purpose of business to do something broader and more impactful? And the conversation started then, and if you recall, there was a lot of conversation around corporate social responsibility, and for a long time, businesses were putting their social responsibility unit as something that existed alongside the main business, and that was their arm to do good. And then we evolved into a situation where social responsibility is increasingly becoming more embedded in what businesses do and what they say about themselves. And for this generation of students and business leaders, this matters a lot. I mean, and particularly, the very recent generation now coming into university, they're concerned and they have reason to be concerned. We've been through a lot. So there has definitely been a shift. And I think that that's something it's positive, and it's my motivation for staying in education is that I think there's a real role we can play there.
Yeah. You're an educator, but you're also an entrepreneur. I mean, how much does entrepreneurship as an attitude, which is how I like to think of it, but how much does that play a role in the future of, of fixing the planet effectively?
It plays a huge role, right? And I think entrepreneurship and education go hand in hand. We try to integrate entrepreneurship and an entrepreneurial mindset into the education of this next generation of leaders. This generation, they're not going to necessarily go slot into pre-existing roles. The world is in turmoil, let's face it. We need new thinking, we need creativity, and that comes from that entrepreneurial mindset.
Do you think, I agree with everything you just said, and this is not really jumping aside, it's probably linked, but, do you think do we think of this as a global, we have to think of it as global, but What are the challenges there in terms of, different countries? We've got the Paris Agreement, some are in, some are not. There's arguments for why and why not. But, how do we approach this regionally? Do we always approach it globally? How I'm asking you really broad questions here, but as
Right.
you're a dean of a school, I can get away with it. But yeah, I'm thinking of this as a student actually coming into this with an entrepreneurial mindset, wanting to fix things, come up with solutions. You've got to think global, I think. I don't know. Interested to hear whether you think differently on that or what.
Not at all. No, I do think you have to think global, and that combination of global and local, I think, is really important. Right? You need, to find solutions that make sense locally, that can be, grasped by communities and owned and driven by them. But at the same time, these types of solutions, such as that which Biochar Life is putting forward, it's not going to work unless it is global, because we need to connect the various pieces of this together. And so, yeah, I mean, the world is deeply interconnected. There are, parts of the world that are, more forward looking in terms of environmentalism, and parts of the world that are far behind, but that shouldn't stop us from marching on. And there are, different constituencies everywhere in the world. One of the things about education is that, you get in the room with a group of students and you'll find, that they're from, 20, 40, 80 different countries, and they're communicating about these issues. And I think that's really important, and an opportunity and a place where change can happen.
Yeah, most definitely. Technology is a big part of that as well. And, we've actually been, having we have ongoing meetings, about progress of the business and what's next. And I, obviously come from a tech background, but Biochar Life isn't a tech company. But for me, technology plays a key role. And when I say technology, I'm talking really, the new technologies of the kind of AI, the tech on the ground, the ability to provide transparency around a lot of these programs, which is key. Yeah. How do you see the role of technology? How important? And are you seeing, how do you see that accelerating things potentially as we need to over the next decade?
Yeah, I mean, I think technological transformation is it's upon us, right? And it can be a force for good or a force for not so good, right? Depending on how it's grasped and utilized. But certainly, no one is going to do anything without technology now. Technology is a part of our lives, and as you say, I mean, it has changed the opportunity for all of us. And I think, one of the great opportunities, you mentioned it there, is transparency, right? And I remember, in the early 2000s when we started, to realize how things were produced. And we were learning about it because of technology and because we were communicating rapidly. Things that could be hidden in the past of what corporations were doing on the back end to make the products that we use every day, they could no longer be disguised from us. There was an increase in that transparency, and that's really led to a shift in our mindset. And I think the more that we can utilize technology to open those doors and to connect people worldwide, the better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this may be a segue, or it probably links, but in terms of that, there's not been great media around the offset market, and obviously there are lots of different offsets, and we're in a carbon removal area. And I think this is something that is not necessarily well communicated. Our job is to communicate better what we do as an organization, our social mission, where carbon plays a role, how it's removing how biochar plays a role, how it's removing carbon. What else needs to be done? And you may have touched on some of these points, but I know we've got to do a better job in terms of communicating what are good offsets, what aren't, what needs to be done. Yeah, what can we do better in that area to make sure people understand where money should be put and what should be invested in?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of lost trust in this space, and that's due to bad actors who always ruin everything for everyone. But so I think there's a process of regaining trust in what we're doing, and I do think that making clearer the relationship between the environmental aspect of biochar and the carbon offsets and the social is something that really can change the game for people, because I think people do disconnect those two issues. And so, those who are interested in carbon offsetting are often people for whom environmentalism and climate change is their number one issue. There's a whole lot of people for whom, social issues may be what they're really concerned about. And if they can see the link between these two things, I think we would have a more powerful way of communicating. And again, transparency, demonstrating the impact of what we're doing is really critical to this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think thinking about the SDGs, because I'm just doing some stuff at the moment around how we report on them, and the SDGs as a framework, because of the interconnectivity of them all, I think is important. Because talking about, hey, yes, this is environment, but however, over here is poverty alleviation, because we're working with a community, and this environmental process that we're putting in place can help to, provide more funding here, allow a family to send kids to school. And so, it's about communication ultimately, but that social mission that we kind of went back to at the beginning, I think is certainly key. So.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I'm a really big proponent of the UN SDGs because they have helped to identify the critical issues, the links between them, and the opportunities that exist for all of us and for communities to address these challenges. Not as just as overcoming the negative, but as a positive force for humanity and a way of seizing opportunities to really build a better world that we live in.
Cool. Couldn't agree more. Look, I think sometimes talking to the individual, and this is, I suppose, an advice type question. Sometimes, the individual, my mum, someone you're talking to, wants to kind of help out in any kind of meaningful mission. It's often overwhelming. And, what's your advice to people who look at, the big kind of global problems, but then think, well, how can I make a difference as an individual? How can I fix climate change? How can I help these smallholder farmers? And do you have any advice to someone wanting to make a difference at an individual level who isn't necessarily working for a charity, isn't necessarily involved in a program where there is an impact being made?
Yeah, I think, one thing, it's important to remember that, impact, even if it looks small and it's on one person's life, is huge, right? If you improve one life, the things that happen from that life and the impact that that person has on many other people or in their community is significant and important. And so, when I talk to people about, being engaged in these issues, I tell them stories about individuals, right? Individuals who have succeeded because someone made even a small investment in them, and then they turn around and make a small investment in others, and on it goes, right? So, I think it is overwhelming sometimes. The world is overwhelming. Open the newspaper. It's, what can I do about this? But you have two choices, right? Go back to sleep and put your head under the covers, or go out there and do what you can as an individual.
Cool. Good advice. And yeah, look, I didn't have any more questions necessarily, but if there was anything I didn't ask that you'd like to share, please do. Or else, how can people kind of learn more about your work, what you do, or get in contact? Maybe you can leave some details as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, I would really strongly suggest people have a look at Warm Heart Worldwide and our website and social media, and look at, what we're doing. We're evolving over time, but Warm Heart has been in operation now for 13 years. And so the impact on the community is palpable and genuine, and there are the stories there, and there are great opportunities for people to be engaged. And I always welcome people to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn and all sorts of social media, and love to chat. Yeah.
Cool. Well, look, for anyone watching or listening, I will leave in the speaker notes. I'll leave the links for Warm Heart, for Biochar Life as well, and also for your LinkedIn. And yeah. Sounds good. Appreciate you jumping on today, and obviously from when you're in the middle of travel. So enjoy the rest of your trip, and yeah, let's do this again sometime, and safe travels home. So
Thanks, Matt. Hope you have a great day today. Thank you.
thanks.